Thank you, John. Yeah, I mean, a very similar picture at Michigan to the one John's described. Michigan Publishing is the publishing division of the university library, and it's conceptualized as providing services that serve a spectrum of publishing needs. So it's exactly as John was describing, and you can see on this slide these two sort of axes, the degree of formal publishing intervention with the university press on the left-hand side, very formal type of publishing, relevant to a fairly small community, humanities and qualitative social sciences, a lot of editorial intervention, a lot of design, things like that, marketing. They're very expensive, but very, very important for a small community. And then also with the university press, very focused on particular disciplines. So really focused away from the institution on disciplinary communities with a sales model which is a revenue model substantially based on sales and rights income. And then in the middle you see Michigan Publishing Services. This is pretty opposed to University of Michigan Press. It's very complementary. It's focused on the needs of the institution. It's fairly agnostic in terms of the subjects it will publish. It publishes materials from the medical school, from law, from business, from engineering, as well as the humanities and social sciences. It's a range of different types of publication, journals, book-like objects, increasingly digital things, which are hard to describe in format terms. And its revenue model is partly library subsidy, and actually there's money that moves from the acquisitions budget to support it, but increasingly recharges. So we charge back service fees to various campus units. The materials are almost entirely open access. And then at the extremely informal end, and with a very strong institutional focus, is the institutional repository, Deep Blue. And Deep Blue is interesting. I think it's typical of a lot of institutional repositories. I think one may underestimate the amount of original materials on those repositories. So what I mean by that is about a third of the content on Deep Blue has never been published elsewhere electronically. So you're thinking of things like working papers, tech reports, white papers of various sorts. So that's an interesting bunch of sort of grey literature type material. And it's becoming particularly interesting now, and Sarah mentioned this in her overview, to see that really streamlining into the data work that we're doing. So Michigan is building a data repository which we'll launch in September, soft launch in September. And those roles of publishing services and data services are starting to stream together. So that will be interesting. So that's Michigan Publishing. And just to fill out that picture, here's the University Press, about 100 books a year. Ancient studies, theater and performance, American politics, and kind of media cultural studies are very strong disciplinary areas, and these are authors from all over the place, very few of them from the institution. And then we have a regional list, as many presses do. And we also, rather unusually, we have an English language teaching, student success, English for academic purposes list, which brings in a third of our revenue. So 100 books a year, revenue from sales and licensing. And then Michigan Publishing Services, here are just some things to illustrate the types of product I was talking about. The Maze Books, that's a sort of an imprint we have from Michigan Publishing Services. There is a selection process that we put materials through. They have to come with a formal proposal and 2 letters of recommendation from tenured faculty members, and they go to an internal committee, and then they're discussed, and then they come up, and eventually I make a decision on whether to publish them or not. We're talking here about conference proceedings, institutional histories, festdrifts, oh, the nightmare of festdrifts, things that basically don't sell, right, and which would be difficult for the university press. One of the particularly nice things we can do with this kind of continuum model is we don't have to say no anymore within the university press. So an emeritus faculty member who is extremely powerful on campus comes to us and goes, I want my book published by the university press, my autobiography published by the university press. Previously, university presses would have to go, go to Create Space. But we don't have to say that anymore. We say, what a fascinating project. Maybe we could be able to help you through Michigan Publishing Services, but you will have to pay us something. And that's great, actually. That's very useful. The journals, this interesting class of journals in the humanities and social sciences who cannot afford article processing charges, don't have enough subscription base to function, and they're falling through the cracks. At the moment, there are very few options for them in terms of digital platforms, for example, with MetaPress disappearing and with Extensa disappearing and Atopon Lite disappearing. So we provide a service for those journals which are important to their communities, and we can tell they're important because we look at the usage stats, but don't have a good sustaining base unless we help prop them up. So this is an example. Saksaha is a journal of Manchu studies, right? Niche community, but it's a pretty important subject area. And then digital projects, it's hard to sort of encapsulate what these are, but they do often have the characteristic of database-type projects. So the Civil Rights Litigation Clearinghouse brings together documentation related to major civil rights cases, and that goes back to major traditional civil rights cases in the South, all the way through to Hobby Lobby recently. So that's enabling work that is done in the law school. And then finally, Deep Blue. Among institutional repositories, it's a reasonable success story. It has about 10 million downloads a year. Whoops. Gosh, that was exciting. But 10 million downloads a year. It has about 80,000 objects in it, and it's about a third of those, again, are original publications. And again, data repository, I think a lot of the future here lies in the streamlining of data publishing and other types of publishing. And I would say also, I think it's interesting with institutional repositories. This is an example when an institutional repository reports into a publishing unit. It's an example of a library adopting a kind of a publishing lens to look at many of their other services. So that means things, thinking about author incentives and thinking about metrics. We've recently signed up for outmetric.com, and it's interesting now when we're putting the donuts, the Outmetric donuts, up, we are putting them on our open access journals, on our books, our open access books, and on the institutional repository. So that's the kind of thing that a publishing unit would think of doing. The library, if it's collecting that. So anyhow, that's an overview.